Good team is going to work well together. I think an exceptional team is going to make each other better. If the folks you've brought in as the leadership team of your organization, if they're not pushing you and challenging you, you've probably got the wrong people in those positions. When confidence turns to arrogance, and then arrogance turns to hubris, then you're in trouble. You'd realize that really it's a mental game. Business is just a mental game that we play out with procedures.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Violand's GPS podcast, Growing Professional Skills. I am your host, Jeff Jones, and the man on the screen with me needs probably little to no introduction as his name is in the GPS podcast title. It is on our door. It's on the sign out front. It's on the paychecks. It's all over the place around here. This is Mr. Chuck Violand, the founder of Violand Management. And I asked him to come on because I've got a lot of questions to ask him. If you're unaware, Chuck founded the company roughly 40 years ago. And recently, about a year ago, we've had some transition. He has sold the business, but has stayed actively involved. And so I think enough time has passed where I can now start asking him the real tough questions with just slightly less chance of losing my job. So Chuck, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
You're very welcome, Jeff. Thanks for asking me. And I have no play in your employment. So,
well, in that case, so I think the big question I want to ask you, because I know I'm not allowed to say how much you sell for. So the other big question that I'm going to have for you is, just before you sold the businesses, I think when we actually launched this podcast, which meant the value of your business had to skyrocket overnight before you signed that paper. How much of a monkey did it throw into the whole negotiation when you suddenly became the owner of a very powerful and well thought of podcast in the restoration industry?
Well, unfortunately, Jeff, when this podcast was first launched, all those numbers were already in writing what it was going to be. So it didn't matter how much it inflated after that. That was the number that we were going to have to agree on.
Timing is everything, Chuck.
It's amazing. It's just amazing.
Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I want to go two different directions with this. Is first, you've done a couple podcasts out there with Jeff Cross and Michelle Blevins and some others where you actually talked about selling the business. So I don't want to go a whole lot there. What I want to talk about is the early days and what it took to build a business. And then what 40 years of running a business has taught you and the knowledge that you could pass on to others, if that's okay.
That's a lot of questions.
It is.
What's the first one you want me to address, Jeff?
Hey, you got a lot of time on your hands, so let's run on this now. So tell us a little bit, most of us who are watching this podcast have known you for a while, and we know who you are. You're very, very steady in the leadership that you've provided to the industry. But go back when you first started this business. What was Chuck Violand like? How is he different than the Chuck Violand we know of today?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I was very different than I am today. At the time, I owned a cleaning and restoration business in Cleveland, Ohio, with my brother, who was my partner. And I came to the realization that really was not where I found fulfillment, and thought that I could leverage what I had built there into a consulting career, which is what I did. And so I still own the business up in Cleveland. I still involved on a loose basis when I started the consulting business until it got launched and was able to support me. That was quite a few years ago.
Did you know coming out of high school that it was entrepreneurial or nothing? You didn't want to work for somebody else?
Yeah, I don't know that I would have named it that, but probably. I think that I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. As I look back and reflect, I think I always had an entrepreneurial streak in me. I was always, as a kid, I was always starting something, running something. My wife likes to kid me about the fact when we were talking about selling the business, she goes, well, you can sell the business, but you're going to have to find something to run. And because I've always, and she knew that was her soft way of saying, you're not running me. So
yes, get out of the house.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. So as I look back on it, I was always running something. I would always have carnivals or fairs in our backyard, and we'd have rides and where we'd invite all the neighborhood kids in. Keep in mind that that was the time when there were a lot of neighborhood kids around. So they would come in and, we'd make a little bit of money and have a lot of fun. Or I started an Olympics where we had different events that we'd run. I was always running something, which probably was an early indication that I'm probably going to want to run my own business at some point. But I was working for other people out of high school and out of college. I was
So it was
working
just
for
kind
other
of
companies.
born into the belief of not following the traditional path. I'm going to start out as a carny, and then I'm going to see where it goes from there, and see what other after life in the carnival. What other businesses did you start after that? Before you got Violand up and running?
Before I got it up and running, my first business actually was a food processing company. You've heard the stories at Violand Management about me and my onion rings. Well, it started because I owned an onion ring company. We manufactured fresh, not frozen, breaded onion rings and frozen breaded mushrooms. And I had two partners, and the three of us thought we could build this business. We bought the equipment and the concept and the recipe from somebody who my family knew. And so we rented the facility, and essentially we were buying the business from them. And so we were selling it to restaurants, onion rings and frozen breaded mushrooms to restaurants in the Stark and Summit County area. Unfortunately, that one burnt to the ground. I know. The onion ring
Maybe a
machine,
follow-up question to that, Mr. Violand.
yeah, but it burnt to the ground. So rather than looking for a place to go to work, I decided to start my own remodeling, sort of quasi remodeling business. But in the process of doing that, I started a painting business, and I had a partner, and we did a painting and contracting business. We did fine finishes, fine wood finishes, and wall coverings. And so we grew that. We were making, we were getting by on that. And then we got involved in a nightclub, owned a nightclub, and then owned a cleaning and restoration business, and then leveraged that. Started out just cleaning and then cleaning and restoration, and then leveraged that into Violand Management. So I've always had that entrepreneurial streak in me.
Was it more driven by was it driven by the opportunity where you said there's a hole in the market, I think I can make this onion ring thing work, I really like onion rings, I really want to own a nightclub, I like doing the remodel stuff? Was it you were bored? How did you find these different opportunities?
Michael Gerber wrote the book, the E-Myth, and in that he talks about having an entrepreneurial seizure. I was in the habit of having entrepreneurial seizures. There's no logic to it. There's no reason to it. You just say, I'm done with this. I'm fed up with it or whatever. And you go on to something else. No research in terms of what's going on in a market. You figure, I can do this. I can make a living at this. And I'm not satisfied with where I am. And so you moved on to another opportunity. At that time, we're talking about my early 20s, it was, you had very, very low expenses, life expenses. I wasn't married yet, no kids. And so it was, you went out and you did something and you paid the bills and you enjoyed it or you didn't enjoy it. If you didn't enjoy it, you went and you did something else. I had a whole lot of fun with the nightclub, didn't make a dime with the nightclub, but learned a lot and had a whole lot of fun. It was a nightclub. We didn't have booze. We didn't have a liquor license.
That is a bold strategy, Chuck.
Yeah. So, but we had great music. Oh man, there was some great jazz, blues that was going on in the Akron-Canton area. So we were real popular with Akron U and Kent State University.
I think one of the things I'm most happy about in my professional career after wearing the brand here for close to 15 years is that your streak of businesses that you own that burned to the ground did come to an end shortly before Violand Management. So I'm very happy.
Exactly right.
I'm very happy you tried a new strategy to get out of businesses later on in your professional career.
Jeff, I remember the first time I related this string of businesses that I owned at a Violand event that was down at Honey Run. And you should have seen the look on people's eyes. They're looking at me like thinking, I
Wow, my
hitched
boss
my,
is into arson. That's
yeah,
something.
I hitched my wagon to this guy. Seriously.
Well, so you get Violand up and what year was that you launched Violand
87.
Management?
Yeah,
87. Okay.
1987.
So 1987, get the business up and running. You're a solo operator. Was consulting big at that time? Was it something that people really were looking for help, or was that still pretty new?
I think it was pretty new. I had hired consultants in my cleaning business, two different consultants, and I had very positive experiences with them. And so it was something that at that time, I mean, I just had flighting, thoughts of wanting to do that at some point in my career. I thought that it would be really emotionally rewarding to be able to do that. Um, but that was really it. Aside from that, I don't think that consulting was huge. Neither one of the consultants that I hired were in the restoration specific consulting industry. The only name that I was familiar with at that time was Mac Clark. And he was the guru of consulting. In my world, he was the guru of consulting in the restoration world. Um, and it was interesting. I asked Mac, we both spoke at the same event in Toledo, Ohio. It was a UCCI, United Carpet Cleaners Institute convention, annual meeting convention. And he was the keynote, and they asked me to also speak. So I had a chance to chat with him. And I said, Mac, why is it that you got involved in the restoration industry? And I mean, he didn't hesitate. He says, it's the people. He goes, I love the people. Now, I don't know whether Mac was being sincere with me or not, but that was his answer to me. And I will I will agree with Mac. That is the biggest thrill that I've had in this industry is the people.
Well, for those in the audience who are not familiar or have never been to Toledo, Ohio, it is the Glass City, and it is the land of milk and honey, and it is the home of the greatest university on the planet, the University of Toledo. All of their alumni are wonderful, wonderful people. So,
and might you be one of those alumni, Jeff?
I might be. So, that first year is up and running, and you're on your own. Like you had a successful business. You were working with your brother. You had employees. You have a family. You have everything going on. You leave all of that behind because this seems fun. This is, that entrepreneurial seizure hits you again, except this time there's strings attached and that you got mortgages and car payments and everything. Yep. So what's that first year like when it's just you and people are expecting you to be an expert?
Well, at that time, most of the guys that I worked with, most of the owners that I worked with were cleaners, carpet cleaners, because that was a big part of the business that my brother and I had built up. Water too, but mostly commercial carpet cleaning. And so many of my clients were commercial carpet cleaners who also did restoration when I first got started. So I was pretty informed. We had also built out a moderate number of procedures, SOPs, for doing that kind of work and for selling that kind of work and for processing that work. So I was able to use those as a framework for what I was offering my clients. But I was also using the model that my previous consultants used with me, where we met on a routine basis. And I became familiar with business numbers as a result of my first consultant. He made me very, very acquainted with numbers. He was superb with that. And so I was able to share that knowledge with the people that I was working with. And I gave talks. I went around, I called, at that time, Jeff, they had a printed magazine that was what do they call it? It was from R&R Magazine, but it was their annual supplier edition. So they had the names and addresses and contact information for all the supply houses in the country. And at that time, John Donne was just getting started. I don't think Aramco was around at that time. So you had a lot of small, independent chemical and equipment distributors. And so I got a hold of that magazine. And one thing I was able to do was sell. And I started making phone calls to the people in there and telling them who I was. They had no clue who I was.
You're just cold calling people out of a magazine.
What's that?
You're just cold calling people out of a magazine to tell them you know a lot about business?
Yeah. Told him my story. I know. Told him my story. Um,
How
and
much of that was I am confident I can do that, and how much of that was, oh boy, I hope this works?
well, it better work, or I was going to have a whole lot of explaining to do to my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you make it work. It's one of those things that you go at it, and you don't even look at the possibility of not succeeding. And so I happen to have a contact, Lee Pemberton,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is out of Pittsburgh, and Lee was a friend of our company because we were buying stuff from him, particularly my brother, and we had him over to do a class at our office in Cleveland, a carpet cleaning class, I believe it was. And we took him out to dinner that night. And I said, Lee, what the industry really needs is somebody to show owners how to sell what you're teaching them how to clean. And he says, you write it and I'll sponsor it. And okay. So I went, he said, put an outline together. I put an outline together, sent it to him. That was when we used the mail. Sent him the outline. He says, this looks pretty good. Let's set a date. So we set a date. I went over to Pittsburgh, did the program. We had a full house, did the program, and he and I chatted. And I said, do you know any other distributors that I might be able to contact? And Lee was very gracious, very helpful in my early years. And he actually introduced me to a lot of these guys. So I called them up, traveled around the country, and to these different places and did workshops. And people were interested in learning more. So eventually a couple of them hired me.
So you've mentioned this several times to Violand people, but let's and you mentioned John Don earlier and Papa Nick Palella.
Yep.
Tell people a little bit about what Nick meant to you and what Nick meant to the start of a business that changed your life.
That's a great question. I owe much. The people at Violand Management owe much. The people in the industry owe much to Nick Palella. Nick, I was very fortunate to have Nick not only as a good friend, but also as a mentor to me. And we worked together for 25 years. That's how long we were doing strategies up at John Don. And Nick was at every one of the strategies that we did. And at our peak, we were doing 8 a year, as I recall, around different John Don stores. And Nick was there at every one of them. And so you'd spend time, it was Nick and Bill Yaden, Steve Traburin, and Angela. Angela Big. Angela was Nick's daughter. And so we traveled around the country doing these things. You get to know somebody when you spend 25 years doing that with him. And I mean, Nick was a very special person to me. And I owe much to him on a lot of different levels of my life. And again, as I've mentioned in the past with the folks at VMA, they owe much. They never really knew Nick, but they owe much to him because of the fact that he allowed me, Strategies for Success was his baby. And he gave us a lot of latitude in what we put in that program. And I took advantage of some of that stuff and did some pretty avant-garde stuff at the time. Now it looks passé, but at the time, as far as leadership development goes, but he just, do it. Sounds good. And so he was very accommodating for what I wanted to do and supported me.
I didn't know him obviously anywhere close to the level that you did, and I didn't have anything to offer him. I was just a guy who worked for his friend. But any show that I was at or any Violand event that he came to, when he would leave, he would walk up to me and make it a point to give me a hug and tell me he loved me.
Is that right?
And I always admired that because, again, he didn't owe me anything. And I knew him and he was a friend and I really enjoyed time with him and I would ask him a lot of questions. But he would go out of his way. And I always appreciated that. He was a very, very special guy.
When we would be doing the strategies programs, if I wasn't on at that time, maybe Bill was up or Steve was up or somebody else was up, he and I would often steal out to the warehouse and just go out in the warehouse and I'd have questions that I'd want to run past him. And he always took the time. And I was very fortunate that he also took me into the fold of his family. And it was very common. I think most times that I would be in Chicago to do the program, one of the nights we'd be over at Nick's house having dinner with his family. And so I got to know his family members, Judy, his wife, and Angela and her sisters. And I mean, I felt like I was part of the Palala family.
So you're getting this business up and running again. You're by yourself. Were you able to get people to trust you early on and sign on to the process? Or were there some signs early on that maybe you bit off a little bit more than you chewed?
No, I never did that. Never felt that way. It was pretty much an upward glide. I mean, it wasn't skyrocketing, but it was an upward glide. I I brought clients on as I was able to handle them myself because it was just me. Um, and as long as I felt that I had the skill set to help them with the challenges that they had. At the outset, most of our clients were smaller in size. So we were able to deal with the issues that they had, the complexity of the issues that they had. And then, as you know, 20 years ago, we brought Scott on. And so the whole idea of bringing Scott and Tim and Tom and then the other consultants on, John, Bill, was because of the skill sets that they brought to the table that greatly expanded my own skill sets, which was a huge component. The company would not have grown without that.
Yeah, I want to ask that question. Exactly what were you thinking when you hired Scott Tackett? The rest of them I get. Hiring Scott Tackett, what on earth were you thinking?
You know what? Hiring Scott Tackett, I'm trying to think of a way to say that. That was probably, if there was an example of me stretching beyond, getting out over my skis, hiring Scott was an example of me getting out over my skis. Clearly, I was unqualified to hire a guy of his capabilities, yet he came on board. And I thought, hey, I hit a home run, baby.
For those who don't know, Scott is our longest running advisor. He's been with Violand about 17 years. He's the HR guy, so we have to give him a hard time. But I heard a quote recently, and forgive me because I can't remember who said it, but it was A players hire A players, B players hire C players. Was that the strategy when you were bringing people on initially with this company?
It might have been a strategy, Jeff. I was the B player. Those guys were the A players. And somehow, some way, they came on board with me. It all grew up from that. Yeah, there's a line in a Steely Dan song. You crossed a diamond with a pearl. And I've used that expression with both Tim and Scott in describing what it was like hiring those two guys. They were clearly a level above the other. Me, for one thing, but also they brought that whole level of professionalism to the clients with who I was working and that we were working. And it just grew from there as we brought the other guys on. And the ladies, we just were very fortunate to be able to attract the caliber of talent that we've been able to attract. And I don't know about you, but it keeps you young. And it absolutely keeps you energized. At least me, it really does.
Big changes this year at the 2026 Violand Executive Summit. The program is now being held July 20th through the 22nd at the Eaglewood Resort and Spa in Chicago, Illinois. This program provides high-impact leadership, sales, HR, and accounting education customized for small businesses in the trades. Choose between 12 different business courses and participate in dynamic, peer-led roundtables discussing your biggest challenges and opportunities. Learn and network where the best of the best go to get better. Registration is open. So you built the team, and say this not just from your own personal what happened here at Viola, but more so just your experience of working with hundreds, thousands of small businesses out there. What's the difference between a good team, and there's a lot of really good teams that are out there, and that high performing a rock star team in your experience?
A good team is going to work well together. And look, I'm thinking this through right now, Jeff. A good team is going to work well together. I think an exceptional team is going to make each other better. A good team is going to come in and do what I would ask them to do, and they would perform it very well. But a really great team is going to make me better as a leader, and they're going to make each other better at what they're trying to do. So it's a virtuous cycle, I guess, is what it would be.
Kind of a elevate each other up as much as they elevate themselves up
They do.
approach.
And I think that continues at our organization. I really do.
Yeah, but you hire this good team and you hire all of these A players and these A personalities, and then they push back and they tell you where you're wrong all the time.
There is that.
Where's the fun in that?
There is that. Well, I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
seriously.
why you have a bottle of wine at home when you get home from the office, right?
But you know what? And Jeff, here's a comment that I make to the folks that I would be working with as clients. If the folks you've brought in as the leadership team of your organization, if they're not pushing you, and I'm talking about gently and respectfully, but if they're not pushing you and challenging you, you've probably got the wrong people in those positions. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but they're not going to give you what you're after. And I think that's what I look for from the folks in our organization. Are they driving me to be a better leader? Are they driving each other to be better at what they're doing? And it isn't just the consultants. It's Liz and Karen and Allison and Bree, everybody there. So do they challenge each other to be better at what they're doing?
When you now take it from the team and put it back to some of the best, I don't know if I'm going to say, I guess leaders or owners or whatever term you want to use there, but go back and look at the most successful clients that you worked with. What was it they consistently got right?
I think there's a couple things. Probably first would be that they're coachable. They listen, and not blindly, but they hired a coach for a reason. And if you hire a coach and you're not willing to listen to them, what's the value in that? And so, they're coachable. I think that they are exceptional at building relationships. I think if there was a thread that I've seen over the clients that I worked with who were really successful, those who were able to build relationships within the organization and outside the organization, they're the ones who succeeded the best. You can't do it alone. And just trusting relationships, that's a big part of it.
So is there the best leaders that you work with, there has to be a level of confidence, and I can do this, and if things fall apart, I've still got this handled. But then sounds like there's some level of humility maybe that goes with that.
Well, there's no question about that. And
so how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's tough. That's the difference between confidence and ego. And you want the confidence, but when confidence turns to arrogance, and then arrogance turns to hubris, you're in trouble. And so it's having an owner who is able to recognize the impact that their ego is having on them and being able to manage it. I struggle with ego with mine every day. So
is there a telltale sign that you think somebody could look in the mirror, ask themselves a certain question of, am I being ego driven? Or am I just confident in what I'm doing, but still flexible enough to understand that I need help? Is there some way that you can just look and say, yep, that's a telltale sign?
Here's what I would recommend to them, to the folks, whenever they're asking that question. I'll say there's 3 questions that you want to ask yourself. Well, not 3 questions, 3 phrases that you want to use and see how easily it is for you to follow it. The first one is to say, I'm sorry.
Okay.
How able are you to say, look, I screwed up. I am sorry. And to mean it. The other one is to say, please. So rather than just dictating, you ask, you say, please, may I do this? And then the last one is to thank people and to thank those people around you. And when you can do those 3 things, and that I didn't make that up. That came from a guy named Marshall Goldsmith. who worked with Fortune 500 CEOs. But I have found it true with small business owners. And if you can't say I'm sorry and mean it, and make sure that the person you're saying it to accepts it, yeah, you're going to have issues as a leader, as a business leader.
I like it. Okay. So then going down that, take it away from the ego and put it back into leadership then, is there something that the business owners they think it's leadership, but it's not leadership? Maybe it's dictatorship, or maybe it's something else.
Well, I think they do, and you see it. You see it all the time. And really, I don't think the mark of a good leader is the leader himself. It's the people that are following. Take a look at the caliber of the people. When we go in and we do a discovery visit with a client, what do? We talk not only to the owner, we also talk to the people in the organization. And it's the people in the organization that are going to be a telltale sign of the caliber of that leader. If you see people who are empowered, if you see people who feel that they work in a safe environment, and by safe, what I'm talking about is it's safe to speak my mind, it's safe to challenge the owner, it's safe to feel that that I can bring value rather than being talked down by the owner, then you've got a pretty good leader.
So I want to throw a little bit of a wrench into this idea that Scott Tackett does in a lot of his different presentations. And it's something I think that we both agree on very highly. And that is the idea that as a manager or a leader, you have to be firm, you have to be fair, and you have to be consistent. And without going into too much detail, that makes sense for a good leader to be firm, fair, and consistent. And if you have a great team top to bottom, if you're the 1927 New York Yankees, well, it's pretty easy to be firm, fair, and consistent. But if you, like most companies that are out there right now, you're struggling to find great employees, so you can't let go of the ones that maybe aren't at that A level just yet. So you have some A players, and maybe you have some B minus players, and maybe somewhere along that range, a few others along the way. How do you be firm, fair, and consistent to the couple that you have that are rock stars, at the same time the couple that you have where you're not even sure they're going to be part of this organization moving forward? Where does firm, fair, and consistent come into play when the people that you're managing have different levels of buy-in, different levels of ability?
Think of it like a family. Okay, you've got 3 kids. I've got 4. My guess is that you've probably managed your 3 kids differently. They've all got skills, they all have personalities and potential. But it doesn't mean you love them any less. Well, there are times, I know with my kids, there were times when I love some more than others, but every parent, but you know what I'm saying. But we love them all the same. We want to give them all the same opportunities, but probably in different ways. I'm going to channel it different ways. The same thing is true with the people in an organization. While some will have more potential than others, I'm still going to give them equal opportunities to succeed within my organization. Otherwise, I'm not being firm, fair, and consistent. If somebody's misbehaving, I don't care if you're a star player or a B player, if you're not following the rules, we're going to have a conversation. That's being fair and being firm and consistent. I don't know if that answers that question for you.
It's creating an environment, culturing an environment where everybody has the opportunity to become an A player.
Yes, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that everybody will become an A player. I may have a B player who's always going to be a B player. And what I may need to do as the leader of my organization is see if there is a place within our organization for this B player. And there may be.
So you have the A player, and I would say this is clearly not me, because I would never have acted up in any way in the 12 years that I got to work for you.
That's probably why we didn't have to censor a lot of the things that you used to send out. So
there may have been a couple people tasked with doing that. A few closed door meetings in Chuck's office at 8 a.m. But hypothetically, if you have A players and they do something that is out of line with your expectation of what you need from them, how do you go about keeping that accountability, that firm, fair, and consistent, without doing or saying something that could be perceived to them as an attack on them or affect the culture within the organization?
Well, I think there's a couple of different levels to that, to your question there, Jeff. First of all, if you have a culture that insists on firm, fair, and consistent, then accountability is just part of that. I mean, it goes right along with it. You can't be firm, fair, and consistent if there's no accountability. Now, let's go to how you address it. If it's an addressing somebody issue, always with respect. I mean, it doesn't matter how egregious it is. It's still going to be addressed with respect for the human being. The behavior is what needs to be corrected. And if you've got an A player, that A player is going to recognize that for what it is. Now, look, if they have an ego that isn't allowing them to see their behavior as getting in the way, then maybe they're not the A player that they think they are. And maybe that's the discussion that needs to take place.
That hurt a little bit, right?
Sorry.
Right there. A little bit hurt. So, all right. Well, now the wound's getting deep. So let's take it out of Violand and let's move it over to the industry as a whole here. You know, you've been at this now for between the business that you owned and then Violand Management and working with thousands of restoration businesses, being part of the Restoration Industry Association and other groups and organizations along the way. How do you compare the restoration industry today to when you first got started into it? What's fundamentally different?
There's a whole bunch that's different. You know, the science just in the 40 years that I've been involved with it is huge. Safety issues, as an example, are a great way to look at the things that have changed. I probably shouldn't even admit this one, but I will admit it. My brother will laugh at it when I say it, but I can remember going out and doing floods with my brother, raw sewage on carpets. And so the way that we addressed those things at that time, we'd suck off the solids and the water, roll those babies up, throw them over your shoulder, bring them back to your shop and dry them. But you stop at McDonald's on the way back and get lunch. So
I was so hoping you were going to say, you just burn that place to the ground.
There were times when we wanted to, but I mean, you wouldn't even think of that now. Yep. And fortunately, we don't think of that now. But I think that those
trying to get somebody who's willing to go out and do that work right now on its own is enough of a pain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the caliber of people. I don't want that to sound like people are bad, but I think the caliber of talent that you can bring into a restoration company now is different than you could 40 years ago, simply because people see a future in that business. They see a way to build a career within a restoration company. Before, nobody even knew what restoration was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people still don't. So has the industry become, in some ways, more professional, or has it become more complex?
I think both. Certainly it's more complex, but I think that a lot of that complexity is going to come with the size of the organization too. I think we have more larger organizations now than we did before. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I think that it's changed fundamentally in the money has come into the industry, and money has allowed different professionals, different types of professionals to be employed within the industry and find careers within it. So I think that that's a big change that has happened.
Yeah, there is now. I've not been at it for 40 years, but it seems in the 15-ish that I've been here, it seems like there's a lot more people with MBAs.
Oh yeah.
In the industry, and there's a lot of people running businesses that, like me, barely got out of high school, but are very, very successful because they can build good teams and they do good work and they understand creating a customer service first type organization that happens to do disaster restoration.
And Jeff, that's one of the things that gives me so much hope for the future of the industry, is that somebody without advanced degrees, without even a college degree, can still find a great deal of success within the disaster restoration industry.
So a lot of people who own these restoration businesses, obviously they have to love the industry. They have to love helping people or they wouldn't do it. There's easier ways to make a buck. But all of the ones I talk to get a little gleam in their eye when they talk about someday selling the business. And as somebody who's been through that process and has helped coach a lot of other people through that process, for you personally, what did it feel like when you had to sell something? And you and I have had this conversation that you have 4 kids, but in many ways you had 5. Violand Management being your most challenging one of all of them. What did it feel like to sell something that you had built over 4 decades?
Until you asked that question just now, Jeff, I would not want to ask my kids what order they thought that was in. So,
we're going to default to making this company the most difficult for this podcast.
Really? So ask your question again. What was your question again?
Yeah, Moose, earmuffs right now, buddy. What did it feel like to sell something that you spent 4 decades building?
Yeah, it feels weird. In stroke of a pen, suddenly you don't rule things, and you do find that people go to Tim. In our particular case, they go to Tim, which they should be doing, and that logically that, and you're thinking, yep, this is what it is. It's cut and dry. But emotionally, I was surprised by the emotional reaction that I had, and I still have some of that, but at the last year in particular, trying to come to terms with that emotionally, it was stronger than I thought it would be. But I think it was also natural. I'm not unique in that. I think most business owners go through it. And that's one of the things, in my experience, that's one of the things, in retrospect, that causes a lot of the confusion and conflict within businesses that transition, is that the owner doesn't go away, that the owner continues to meddle in things that they shouldn't be, and it just creates unnecessary grief.
We were all in the conference room together when you signed the paperwork, when Tim signed the paperwork, and Chuck Violand didn't change. You still are responsible for helping tons of small businesses. There's still a lot of people who give you a lot of credit. I still get phone calls from people saying, hey, I saw Chuck present at Strategies for Success 10 years ago, and you guys haven't done that program since before COVID. They're calling and saying, I saw him 10 years ago. I wasn't ready for him now, or I wasn't ready then, but I'm ready for him now. You still write books. You're still an award-winning author. You're still asked to present at industry events. But when you sold the business, did it feel like your identity changed?
That's deep.
That's what I offer here that's why the podcast is so valuable. Tim made so much money
and so popular
on day one. Yes.
Jeff,
me and Rogan.
Let me ask you that question. Do you think that my identity has changed? Because you might be a better judge than me.
No, I don't think that's the case. Obviously, family comes first and faith and all of that. So we're going to take that and put it over here, and that would have no effect on family and faith. From the business standpoint, I'm going to tell you here internally, it didn't, other than we just didn't see it quite as often. Right. But I think that was a directive that Tim was very deliberate about, was that it's still a team and you're still part of the team. And I don't know if that's the case for every business that sells, especially if you get PE coming in and the owners walks out the door and doesn't come back the day after it's signed, then I think maybe that's a little bit different.
I've got to believe that it is different there. I know that Tim has made a deliberate, like you're saying, he's made a deliberate effort to want to continue to include me at whatever level I want. And he's made that very clear. It is the level that I want. He would welcome any level of engagement. At the same time, I also want to be respectful of the fact that Tim is the owner of the business. I am not the owner of the business. I am just a contractor for the business, actually. I'm not even an employee anymore. So I want to make sure that I don't interfere with anything he's doing. I don't want to insert myself where he would not want me to insert myself.
Was there anything, a year later looking back, was there anything that has really surprised you about staying on in the business, about how it's made you feel? Or is there anything that maybe mattered less than you thought it might?
Uh, yeah, yeah, you do find that, Jeff. Um, and I didn't know if I would, because obviously I was so closely linked to it for 40 years. Um, but yeah, suddenly some things don't seem to matter as much. And I think that that's good. And here's a funny little story. When Tim and we transferred ownership, it actually took place legally at midnight on New Year's Eve, between New Year's and New Year's Day a year ago. And so my daughter and her family were in town over the New Year's Day to celebrate New Year's with us. And so after we transitioned, I called Tim on the phone, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. And she comes downstairs with a gift for me. And I thought, wasn't that sweet? She brought a little gift. So she hands it to me and I opened the box and it's a candle. And I thought, well, that's really nice of her, the candle. She goes, read the label, Dad. So I look at the label and it says, smells like not my problem anymore. There are times when I have been in a discussion with my wife about what's going on here, and she'll bring that candle over and she'll go, you want to light it?
I can see that right now. Tim's calling you, telling you about some idiotic thing your team of A players happened to do the day before, and you just grab the candle and hold it up to the screen.
Good luck,
big smile on your face. Yeah, just like, my check's still coming in the mail, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think obviously you got your start, and what you were known for, especially early on, was you were a guru when it came to understanding your business financials, when you were somebody that was not an accountant, learning general accounting practices and applying that to your business using terminology that everyday people could understand. Obviously, the sales part came with it, and then building into what the role of a leader, of an owner really looked like. And for the years where I was selling for you, the number one reason that somebody would call and say, hey, can we talk? And I would ask, okay, what's going on in the business? They would say that they have what we called stage 2 stall. The business had grown to a certain point, somewhere in that $2 to $7 million range traditionally. And then it just stopped, installed at that particular level. And maybe that was okay for them. And now they're getting ready to sell the business, or maybe it's Groundhog Day or whatever it was. But since that's really where Chuck Violand built the reputation, was helping companies get past that, and you've written books on this, what's the secret? How does an owner get out of stage 2 stall and continue to grow the business?
Well, the first thing you have to do is look in the mirror. There were, in that book, Stage 2 Stall, booklet Stage 2 Stall, we looked at 4 leading causes of it. And they all had to do with having to look cleaner in the mirror. A business is going to stall because the owner has stalled. At the end of the day, Jeff, that's what it gets down to. So the place you want to start looking is, okay, what's going on inside me that I need help with? If it's, maybe I'm not, something as simple as I'm not writing a plan. So I have a blurred vision. I don't know where I want to go. Therefore, I'm just poking and hoping that something's going to work. It might have to do that I have stopped growing myself, which is a leading cause, in my opinion, of why businesses stall. We become comfortable. The owner becomes comfortable. We're done. Okay, we're either physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, or we're just ready to check out. And when you reach that stage, your business is going to stall. And so you need to get serious about it and say, am I willing to re-energize that, or do I need to move aside? Because at some point, your business is going to start to decline.
Was that a belief that it took you a while to recognize that pattern? Was that something that you knew early on when you started this business? Did that change over time, or is there something different about leadership and running a business that really today you say this is the way, versus when you first started, maybe you didn't recognize it back then?
No, Jeff, it's all changed. When I look back at the early years of when I was consulting, it was all technical issues. That's what I had. I had technical processes, procedures that I was able to give guys. So it was all technically oriented. And then only to realize as I would hand different clients the same document, the same procedure. It worked with some, it didn't work with others. You start going, okay, why? It's the same advice, same counsel. Why is it working for some? And so you start to dig deeper and you'd realize that really it's a mental game. Business is just a mental game that we play out with procedures. And so, now it's very clear that until you get between the ears of an owner until he can or she can and recognize behaviors and then manage those behaviors, nothing is going to change in the business. So to uninstall it, that's the first place you want to go. But I think that that's the big change. I don't know if that's happened in the consulting industry or just at Violand Management, but it's progressed from the stage where you're looking at it from a procedure, a stuff mindset to a mental mindset. We've still got the procedures. You need those, but first you need to understand the owner. You need to understand where they're coming, the leader, where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think one of the things you told me early on when I started here was the issues of the companies we work with very rarely are procedure based.
Right.
They're usually decision and action based. Is there a specific mistake that you have seen repeated over and over in the industry that just hasn't changed over all this time?
First of all, numbers. I think it's important that business owners understand their numbers. And so many of us don't. And that's unfortunate because all you have to do, if you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you can understand business numbers. I'm not an accountant. And if I can understand them, anybody can understand them. So I think that that's the first thing, getting that. And the other thing is understanding yourself and, where you are the bottleneck. We're always a bottleneck. The leader of the business, always at the top of the bottle, they're always a bottleneck. It's recognizing that and then doing something to free it up.
So somebody who kind of did live out the American dream, has a great family, has great faith, built a business, sold a business, still actively involved doing the things that you love the most right now, not having to worry about making payroll every week anymore. What does success mean to you now that maybe it would have been a much different answer 20 years ago?
Oh, you were describing me. I thought you were describing
you.
Client.
So weird, huh?
What do you say? What does life look like now?
What's success mean to you now versus what success meant to you? Not that you were wrong, but 20 years ago, what would success have meant to you then versus now at this point?
Thank you. Well, 20 years ago, keep in mind that my kids were still in college. So success at that point was making sure they got out. Okay.
And by out, you mean out of the house.
Yeah, well, both. Okay.
Right.
Now, success, I think success for me is continuing to contribute what I can, to continue to bring value to the people in my life, whether it's family, whether it's at VMA, or whether it's clients. If I can continue to have a positive impact on people's lives, to me, that's successful. And if I can't do that, then that is certainly the opposite of success.
So I've saved this question for last because I know you're going to hate this question. So I didn't want to throw off the rest of the podcast here. But you are not somebody who is driven by ego. I think everybody who's met you, or if you are, you do a very good job of hiding it, but you do not come across as that type of an individual. And I can say that as somebody who's known you for a while now. But not that you're anywhere done. You travel as much now as I think you ever have on behalf of this company. So you're not going anywhere away from Violand Management. You're running into the fire, not away from it still. But when people think about your legacy in this industry moving forward, what do you hope it will be?
Yeah, Jeff, I think I'm going to go back to the comment I just made. if I have had a positive impact on their lives, however that is, then that would be a pretty nice legacy to have, that I influenced somebody for the better, that they enjoyed their life, more success in their life because of interaction with me at some point.
That'd be a cool place to be. Well, Chuck, thank you very much for coming on the Violand's GPS podcast, formerly owned by Chuck Violand.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry you didn't get to capitalize on all of our fame and riches, but there's still time if you want to get back involved in the ownership group someday. But we appreciate you being very much. So I'm going to leave it to you for last say out to the audience. And the last thing I'm going to tell people, because I'm not very good at the podcasting thing, is they all say to like and subscribe and share and, I don't know, put little hearts all over the place. So help us build the membership with that. And I will leave it to you, Chuck, for final comment to the audience.
Keep moving forward. Tell somebody around you, that you love them, and spread that. Spread the good.
Love it. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you in a future episode of Violand's GPS podcast.
Bye, folks. Thank you.